Hi there. In the previous screencast, we saw how we can reuse code in PHP. So we had this an index.php file, and what we did was we extracted the common component in that project, in that file, which includes the header and the footer. We created two new files, header.php and footer.php. We pasted all our components, the common components over here in these two files, and then we call these two files from the original file. And the method that we use to call these two files is include followed by the name of the file we want to include. We did that for the header and the footer. Now based on this, what we did was we created a new page which was called contact.php, and in that page we were able to just create the page by calling those two files and then creating the body of the page, where we just put the heading one called contact me, and we could see that the output is somewhat like this. Okay, so this was our main goal, and so how we could reuse components in PHP. We don't need to rewrite and copy paste everything from the same place, but this is how we could do it. Now in this screencast, we're going to talk more about the issues that we face when we do that, when we take out the common component from a PHP file. We see some issues that happen, and we are going to solve that issues by using the power of variables, conditionals, and looping statements in PHP. Let's see how we can do that. The first problem that we face is, suppose you see this, we have every page is supposed to have a title, which is here at the top. So every page is supposed to have that. Now this title is actually, if you remember the basics in HTML, this title is inside the head tag. So let me go back and go to our header.php and see that this title is actually over here inside the head tag. And inside the head tag we have a title. So now since I remove this header part into a separate file, and now reusing the same file for all my PHP files in the project, they will have the same title. Now this doesn't make sense. Usually titles are different based on the page you are on. Suppose you're on the home page, you'll prefer a title something like this. Let's have home and then buy from me. And suppose if you are on the contact page, you will have something like that, contact buy from me. Now how can we make a custom title when the component is common? A very good way to do that is using variables. Now how can we do that? It's simple. Let's suppose that we create we have a variable called title. Now so I just told you that whenever I'm on the home, I would like it to display something like this, home and this, right? Now what is changing is this first text over here. So this has to be from the file. So what I'm going to do is that this text is dynamic. So I'm going to make this text a variable. Now whenever I want to add PHP to an existing HTML page, as I told you earlier, we are going to use the delimiters. Now within that delimiters, I want to echo out a variable, and that variable, let's suppose, is title. I'm assuming that I define this variable somewhere. Now I'll tell you later on how to do that. But now see, so whatever the value of this variable will be replaced over here by that value. Now without defining that variable, you will see that I'll get a big error inside my title. So if I refresh this, you will see this, there is a notice saying that this is an undefined variable. You can read that, undefined variable title, because we didn't even define the variable. Now how do we define the variable, and where do we define this variable? That's simple. Let's go to our page. Let's suppose I'm on the index page. Now on the index page, I want to define my variables over here, so that it can be passed on to the header.php file. Now there is the only way to do that is actually defining the variable before you call the file. So let's suppose I'm going to define it title equal to, and over here, because I told you that if I'm on the home page, I want it to be called as home. Similarly, if I'm on the contact page, I want it to be called as contact. So I'm going to say dollar title equal to contact. Okay, now let's see what happens. So I have on the title page I defined it contact, and on the index page I defined it as home. So I'm going to save both of these pages, and then I'm going to go back to my project and then refresh this page. You will see that since I'm calling from the contact page, it comes as contact buy from me. And if suppose I go to my index page, which is my home page, you will see that now it comes as home. So see, I'm reusing the knowledge of variables to define something dynamic that can be changed in the page that I'm sharing. So this is how you use variables. So the first problem that you saw was, suppose that I have something like this, an issue where the common part needs to change some values inside it. Because it's a common, I'm going to reuse it for any other page I define. Any new page I want to create, I will just say include header.php. So in that case, whenever I'm doing that and I want to change some values within that, I have to use PHP variables. The dynamic part of that page will be using PHP variables. And the only way to define that variable is from the calling file, and defining it before calling the file. Because if you define it after calling the file, it doesn't make any sense, because the variable has to define before actually calling the file. So this is how it works. Now, apart from this, the next issue, this is the first issue that happened. And the next issue, let me talk to you about the next issue. Let's go back to our page. See over here, let's say there is a class created within your CSS called on. Now that class is responsible for telling you that you are currently on the contact page. Let me go over here. Let me go to my code, and in the header, if you go to the header.php file, you can see that I have a list item, the menu bar, href to stuff, href to contact, and href to shopping cart. Now the hrefs are not defined because they are put as hash, because they are not defined right now. But contact page, we just created that, so why not replace this hash by contact dot php. Okay, so that means this will be working right now. So I'll go back to my page, refresh it, and now when I click on the contact, it will go back to the contact page, and I click home, it goes back to the home page. So that means hyperlink is working. Now the issue that I was talking about is like this. Now suppose that you're on the home page. Whenever I go on the contact page, it should underline this, saying that this is the current page I'm on. This is called the navigation state. I'm currently on this page. If I go to the stuff page, it should underline the stuff page, saying that I'm currently on the stuff page. Okay, so how could we do that? How could we do that? Now there is a class, as I told you, there is a class that is already available, which is called, if I say on, which is already created in the CSS file. You have already created a style.css file which is available. So for example, if I go there, search for the on class, okay, it's going to take some time, so I'm not going to show you that, but let's see it in practice. It's much better than that. Okay, I'm going to close this style.css, but it's there. So let's go back to our page, and I'm going to refresh this. So you see that now it says contact is underlined because I just put it as on. But if I go to the home, you see it's still on because it's in the common page. It's in the header.php and it's set to on. So no matter which page I am, it is always on. But I don't want that. I just want it to be on when I am calling this header from my contact.php page. So now how can we do that? Now we can again use the power of variables, but this time I want to combine it with the power of conditional statements. So let's do that. Suppose I'm here now. I'm going to go to the contact, the header page, and I'm going to use this on has to be only appearing when I'm coming from the contact page. Now, so I'm going to say if, so since we are integrating PHP within HTML, so I'm going to just put the delimiters that I told you about. So whenever you want to have PHP inside HTML, I want to have this. So I'm going to echo on, but I want to echo on only when there is a condition. I'm going to say if. Now what is that condition that I'm looking for? If the variable $title, I already defined the variable title, right? So if you go back, you already have a variable called contact when you're coming from the contact.php page. You can also create another variable, but since we already have one, why to create another? Okay, but it's your choice. Again, you can create a variable specifically for checking if it's coming from the contact page for this condition. So if I'm said if $title, since it's a string, I'm going to use 3 equals as I told you earlier, and then I'm going to compare it with contact. Okay, I have to be case sensitive because you see my contact C is capital over here. That's why I'm putting it as contact. So if $title is equals to contact, then only I want to make echo as on. Otherwise, I don't want to do that. Okay, so that's it. So that's the thing. If I just want it to be over here, I just use my conditional, the knowledge of conditionals. Now I'm going to save this page, and let's go back to our testing platform and see what happens. I'm going to refresh this. See, now the underline vanished because now I'm calling from the home page. Now if I go back to the contact page, you can see now that the underline came back because now I am in the contact page. Okay, I'm going to do another thing, which is I'm going to go back over here, and this time I'm going to create another page called stuff.php. Okay, let's do that. I'm going to say file, new file, and then I'm going to call it stuff.php. Finish. Then I'm going to again import the header and the footer. So PHP include the header.php, and I'm going to also include the footer.php. Okay, so now now since you already know that, so now I created a new file which is stuff.php. I'm going to create the content later on. So I'm just concerned about the header and the footer. So let's go back to that page. Let's go back to that page calling stuff.php. Then I'm going to record that. You can see the error again occurs because it says undefined variable. Because see, I'm coming from a different page now. That page is stuff.php, and since I did not define the title, I failed to declare the title over here. It's giving me an error. So every time you are going to use it, you have to define a title so that your title and the page becomes correct. So I'm going to use title, and this time I'm going to say stuff. Okay. Okay. So now let's go back and refresh this, and hopefully my error is gone. Now I want to do this again. I want to say whenever I'm on the stuff page, I want to underline this stuff, and then that should be same. That should be exactly same what I did earlier. So I'm going to go to the header page, and over here I'm going to first make this stuff.php so that my hyperlink is active, and then inside my classes I'm going to say PHP if $title. Now this time I'm coming from the stuff page, right? Stuff. So I'm going to say if $title is equals to this, then only I want to echo on, and then I want to close my PHP statements. Okay. So I did the same thing I did earlier. So I'm adding conditional statement saying that if the title is set to stuff, then only echo on, then only add the class on to this class, the rest of these classes. So if I'm coming from contact, then only add class on to over here. So that's what I did. To save that, and let's go back and see what happens now. I'm going to the home page. Nothing is underlined, and it's home in the title. I'm going to go to the stuff page. You see the title now has stuff, and my stuff is underlined saying that I am on the stuff page. I'm going to go to the contact page, and then you can see the title becomes contact, and my navigation state changes, and I'm having underline over there. So this is what the main lesson was. So anytime you face a problem when you are making something common from a page, you always encounter issues where you want to have something specific to that page, something specific. So whenever you have something specific, you can always use variables, conditionals to make that specific part. Now if you are using variables, make sure you define that variable whenever you are calling it from the page, and you should define that variable before calling the page. So over here, see, if I'm calling the page include and I have to use a variable called title, I should define it before calling the header.php page. Similarly, if I want to have something from in the footer, I have to make sure that I do that. I define it before going there. Okay, so that's it. These are the two problems that we faced, and we actually solved it using our knowledge of variables and conditional statements, what we learned earlier in this course. So hope this helps. Okay, that's it.